Well, welcome back again on Sunday night. This is where we move from week 5, where we had the midterm, back to a more normal week where we're going to do some new material, perhaps get a chance to review some old, and as the normal procedure is this week, we're back to having a discussion. So I am looking forward to checking out all your answers to our midterm NBA dilemma. I do suppose I owe you a bit of an explanation, as I promised I'd let you know what our response was when I told you about the student who had the chance to discuss this assignment with an actual NBA owner. And a gentleman, as I mentioned, named Ted Leonsis, who at the time, and I believe still may, own the Washington Wizards. Also owned the Washington Capitals of the National Hockey League. And he told our student that his answer to this question was that it depended on which league he was talking about, whether he was talking about the NBA or the NHL. And he based it, his opinion, on that he felt the fan bases were different and of a different expectation. And at least in the markets he was dealing with, he felt that the NBA fan was a little bit more impatient, and it had more immediate economic impact and more immediate business advantage for his team to make the playoffs as often as possible. And that there were a lot of side benefits to that in the marketing and other business considerations. And that the NHL fan base was a little more patient and a little more loyal, and would respond to the efforts of team building through the draft and other methods of actually building that team over time. And so therefore he felt more comfortable with the idea of playing to get that draft pick, not necessarily tanking, but if he was playing with the hockey team, if he was speaking as the owner of the hockey team, than if he was speaking as owner of the basketball team. So just a little perspective from somebody who lives and breathes the business on the midterm question you just answered. Okay, last week in the readings leading up to being able to talk wisely about the dilemma presented in the question, we had a lot of material on the value of teams and the value of teams to communities, to cities, and you read some differing opinions on some folks who felt the teams do have a great value. You'll see a lot of that in the media when a team moves or maybe wants a new stadium or something. It almost sounds like they're holding the municipality hostage. And one of the arguments is always, see the value we bring to a community. Yet you also read some material where some very experienced sport economists talk about the fact that the major effect on a local economy of having a sports team is kind of negligible. It's an interesting proposition, and I've watched it play out, as I mentioned in last week's introduction, at the minor league level. That instance, by the way, is in Hartford, Connecticut, is not going that well because the stadium that is being built to accommodate this Double-A team is not ready yet, and the season has opened. And that particular team, the Hartford Yard Goats, will play 51 road games before they play their first home game. So you can see that this whole argument of economic impact and community development and all those factors around having a team in your town takes on a whole new meaning when it doesn't happen on time. And there's a lot of interesting arguments. Maybe if I get some more developments before the course is over, we'll be able to see how that plays out too. Okay, this week we're moving on to a little bit different topic, and it's one also that a lot of people talk about when we ask about the pressing issues in sport economics. And this one is, what's a player worth? Why do they make these astronomical salaries? Why are things so almost out of proportion with reality? I can tell you back a long time ago, I was a young professional in a Fortune 500 company, and I was just out of graduate school. And I had a pretty good year, and my company had a bonus program, and the New York Times that year published an article about the life of a backup catcher on a Major League Baseball team. And I had a pretty good year. I made about, I got a bonus, and I made about $35,000. And I was really happy with myself when I read that article because I made more than the major league minimum salary in the late 70s. Well, wouldn't be able to say that these days, would I? Salaries have outpaced anything else in economic growth that we've seen around us in other industries. People make outrageous amounts of money for playing games, and we all flock to the games and flock to our TV sets and buy product, buy merchandise, and it just seems to have no end. So the question becomes, from an economist's point of view, is what makes this market go? Why does it drive itself in the way that it does? How do we determine the value of a player? So this week, I really want you to go into the stuff from the Boston Federal Reserve. Once again, I think that explains it extremely well. And then I want you to look at the readings where we talk with some other very prominent people who talk about the market for players, whereas last week we were talking about the market for teams. I think you're going to find it interesting. It's going to be maybe a little bit difficult, again, this week to separate your perspective of that from the business person, from putting on our hat as a fan of certain teams and arguing about the relative merits of a player. But as you think about it, especially as we're now moving into a new baseball season, basketball is winding down towards the playoffs, football, we're going to be inundated with draft information, all that kind of stuff. A lot of this now revolves around the players, and I'd really like us to consider what are we thinking about when we think about the value of a player from the business standpoint, the health and well-being of your team, both competitively and financially. This is why we did the segment on competitive balance a couple of weeks ago. It feeds into this, and I think you're going to find it all very interesting. I will dive right into reading those midterm essays, and I really want to thank you for all your efforts. And with the week off, I hope everybody got recharged, and we can go back in and have one of those really excellent discussions that we've been having all along. So with that, if there's any questions, as I always say, please contact me. And thanks for everything that you're doing. Okay? See you next week.